Brian Thomas with EastWest here, and what we're introducing in this video is quite possibly one of our most ambitious projects to date, and we're calling it Iconic. Now, the big idea with this instrument was to create a synth that could faithfully reproduce some of the most iconic sounds in music history, while also giving you a synth library that is ideal for modern music production. Now, to accomplish this, we brought in Mr. Anthony Marinelli, who is an absolute legend in the synth world. He was the synth programmer for Michael Jackson's Thriller album, which is the best-selling album of all time, so that's kind of a big deal. And we recorded not only his own personal synths, but they were also programmed by him. So you get these beautiful, pristine, original sounds. Now, we then ran those recordings through the Opus engine to create a massive selection of synth presets, ranging from the basic sounds then you have these massive iconic sounds like the one we're about to hear. And these were often created by combining multiple keyboards and synths to create one overall sound. And of course, only the original programmer knows what settings and combinations were used. All right, so that's just kind of a brief introduction to what Iconic is all about. Now I want to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Greg Phillinganes. He's an absolute legend in the music industry, and he's going to take you through more of these classic presets.
My name is Greg Phillinganes. I started my career with Stevie Wonder, went on to work with Quincy Jones, Eric Clapton, David Gilmour, Lionel Richie, Bruno Mars. I also was blessed to be part of Thriller, featuring Michael Jackson. We're here to talk about some of those iconic sounds with my good pal,
Doug Rogers. The combination of Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson, Greg Phillinganes, Anthony Marinelli, all of that talent has now been bottled up for the future. Greg's here making sure that everything sounds, authentic.
And you did a great job, bud.
Thank you. Couldn't really put out anything that didn't sound authentic, because it is the biggest selling record of all time. Iconic was based on iconic keyboard parts, where the keyboard part has bigger hook in the song as the vocal part, particularly made around that 80s period. A lot of these sounds are just, you can't get today because the equipment doesn't exist. Anthony Marinelli has a museum of this stuff. You look at some of those keyboards inside them, some person wired together like 1,000 little wires to make this thing work. Like AT&T wired up this keyboard, right?
The cabling involved.
The cabling is just insane.
Yeah.
No one ever does that these days. The intention is for people to take these iconic sounds and use them in new music. So you're hearing authentic sounds from the guy that programmed everything being played by the person that actually played everything.
Ha! All right, so now let's talk about the basic structure of the library. And you've got three main parts. The first of which is the classic elements, which are essentially the sonic foundations of the library. So here, for example, you've got a kind of classic distorted bass synth from the Oberheim OB-X. So where things start to get really interesting is in this next section, which is the classic presets. And these are basically taking those classic elements, passing them through multiple effects and even combining them with each other to emulate other iconic synth sounds. So for example, this lead that we're about to hear was inspired by the lead synth in Cold as Ice by Foreigner. That one is just so much fun to play. Let's check out one of the polysynths. And this one was modeled after just one of those really fat synth stacks from Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. We've also got some really cool arpeggiated synths. This next one was modeled after that really epic ARP synth that comes in, I think, in one of the later choruses of Holding Out for a Hero. All right, now let's check out some classic keys, and you might recognize these from the intro to Take On Me. And of course, you have a ton of classic pads to choose from. This one is based on the main pad from What Is Love by Hathaway. So I think that's a great versatile pad. And of course, all of these patches can be used to good effect in modern productions, as well as, if you're going for the original vibe of the piece. They're designed to be super versatile and super flexible. So let's go ahead and talk about the interface. And you have all of the standard controls that you'll typically find in a synth plugin. You've got arpeggiators, you've got tons of effects, tons of filters, envelopes, and all that fun stuff. And we'll explore the arpeggiator in just a minute. But we wanted to try something a little bit different with this instrument to help kind of jumpstart the creative process, whether you're modifying existing presets or creating your own. And that is the effect matrix. So let's start with stutter, and we'll hear what this does on this patch. I'm going to start with it off. Now we're going to turn it on. So that one is pretty gnarly. Let's check out Dream next. And again, I'm going to start with the effect off. And now here it is with Dream. All right, and this next one is Space. And again, I'm going to start with the effect off. And then here it is with Space. So I find that one to just be really inspiring. Now, this last one is called Grit. And again, I'm going to start clean. So you can have a lot of fun with those. Now, CC1 is doing something a little bit different in this library. It's basically crossfading between the different sources that we used to record these synths. So we recorded these clean into Pro Tools while simultaneously recording through some analog Studer tape machines, including the iconic J37 tube multitrack. So you get that nice harmonic distortion and tape saturation that's ideal for a lot of modern production and soundtracks. And it's totally variable from clean to dirty. depending on the position of the mod wheel. All right, next, let's explore the Arpeggiator, and you can have a lot of fun with this. I'm going to start with a different patch entirely. Let's use the JP8 vibrato lead, and that sounds like this. So let's turn the sustain all the way down so it's even more percussive. And let's go ahead and turn on the Arpeggiator. Let's do 2 octaves, 30-second notes, no swing, and let's hear what that sounds like. It's already sounding kind of epic. Let's go ahead and turn on that delay, and we're going to make it a 100% ping pong stereo delay. Turn the repeat down just a bit, and let's also go ahead and turn on the reverb. Okay, let's go ahead and check out some of the presets in Beyond Iconic. So again, these are going to be geared more towards modern music production. This first one is Nonstop Poly 2. This is just a nice, fat, really versatile polysynth. So again, that's just such a fat polysynth, great for pop, great for EDM. And you're probably going to hear that in a lot of my music going forward. Now, this next one is called Fairy Pool. This is an ARP synth, and it's just got such a vibe. Now, quite a few of the presets in Beyond Iconic were also modeled after synths from modern hit tracks. So for example, the lead that we're about to hear was inspired by the lead synth in Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. All right, let's go ahead and check out a bass synth. And this one is called Slap Happy. Great for EDM, great for pop. And here's another really heavy pluck polysynth that was inspired by the deadmau5 track Escape. All right, and let's check out some keys. This one is called Bells in Heaven. All right, let's check out one of the leads, and this one is called Addictive. It is super inspiring. This is one of my favorite patches in the library. So that one is just a ton of fun to play. Next, let's check out one of the pads. This one is called Cloudfall. It's got some evolving elements. Here's one of my absolute favorite presets in the library. And this one was inspired by the polysynth from 24K Magic by Bruno Mars. And you can just do so much work with this one preset. Now, a lot of these are also going to work really well for scoring to picture, whether it's films, TV shows, or video games. This one, I think, just has such a massive atmospheric vibe. All right, so at this point, we thought it would be kind of cool to give you a quick behind-the-scenes look on how Iconic was made.
Hi, I'm Anthony Marinelli, and I've been programming synthesizers for quite some time, since I was a teenager. I still love it.
Our company has been at the leading edge of sampling technology for actually 35 years. It's iconic sounds from an era where I think they really went all out to make some of the best-selling records in history. I wanted to do it because just like the equipment that we have in our studios, which is very old, it really was the best of its kind. I mean, it was really made without any kind of financial input whatsoever. You couldn't make these kind of keyboards with the components they have in them in today's market. Even when you look inside them, the complexity, the handwork, the wiring, everything that went into them was just insane. And the sound matches what you're visually seeing in the creation of these keyboards. They're just state of the art. I contacted Anthony, who's decades doing this kind of work in the industry, you know, worked on the biggest album of all time. He was the synth programmer on Thriller, and worked with Giorgio Moroder, you know, all these people that basically keyboards were a very big part of the production, to come in and help us on this. And we didn't want to just sample these keyboards, we wanted also to create some of the iconic sounds from that period that people would recognize, and hopefully they could use them on future productions and add a little bit of spice to some new music. There are two aspects to it. One is capturing these incredibly detailed, expensive keyboards, and the second one is using the people that were actually there at the time, programming these keyboards and synthesizers so that we could come up with exactly the same sounds as they did back in the day when they were creating pretty much the soundscape of our lives.
It's really fun to look back on the sounds of the 80s, especially the late 70s and the 80s, because the instruments back then were designed to sound the best they possibly could, and they weren't built to a certain price point to sell. And they've become, at this point, very rare and very expensive and very difficult to maintain, to keep operating. But a lot of people are starting to appreciate, you know, how good they sound. And so by sampling them in an uncompromising kind of way, the way that I think only Doug Rogers would do at EastWest, which includes recording to tape, recording to saturated tape, recording with different analog to digital converters, and really capturing what it sounded like back then, which was just a very high quality aesthetic. Now, there's a lot of VSTs where you can program and play around with the sound, but you don't quite get the force and the attack and the three-dimensional quality that these instruments deliver. So by sampling them and doing this today, you're able to actually get the sound, and you'll be able to still control the sounds in quite a musical way.
We think this is good historical work that we're doing as well, to try and preserve these pieces of equipment for future generations.
So that is Iconic. Now, it's available for sale right now as a standalone purchase on our website and anyone who sells EastWest products, but it's also just part of the Composer Cloud Plus subscription. So if you are a subscriber, go ahead and open up your installation center and you should see Iconic ready for download. So I want to thank you so much for watching, And if you liked this video, don't forget to like it, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.